My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you're here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask your pardon for my sins and the grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. Many years ago, when I was living in Rome, I had the opportunity to attend a get together, a meeting with a very interesting man. His name was Joaquin Navarro Valls, was because he passed away a few years ago. And for many years, he was the spokesperson for Pope John Paul II, the Pope that came before Benedict XVI, Pope that was a saint, was canonized not too long ago, Saint John Paul II. And this man, Joaquin, spent many years with him. Being the spokesperson to the Pope, he was very close to him. And he spent many hours, of course, speaking about the church, talking about communication, about strategies of how to communicate things, how to deal with people and the press, more especially, but also as a personal friend. They spend hours and hours together going places. There's a side of the life of John Paul II that we don't know as much, and in that get together with Joaquin, I kind of got to learn a little bit more about was his love for the mountains. John Paul II loved to go into the mountains when he was young. He loved to go skiing with friends and people, but also as a pope, he loved to go out into the mountains. And it's not easy, as you might realize, for the pope to go anywhere. He's such a celebrity in Rome and around the world that anywhere he goes, he is harassed by people. So obviously, it's not easy for the pope to just go for a weekend and go for a walk in the mountains. But the Pope sometimes would do that. And with a small group of people, he will kind of sneak out of the Vatican in an ordinary car and just like dressed up in mountain clothes. And they would go out and walk in the mountains for hours. And in one of these outings with John Paul II, very few people were with him, a bodyguard, Joaquin, and then I think maybe some one or two other people. They were just walking around mountains in Italy. If you've ever been there, it's beautiful. Just yeah, it's amazing beauty of the mountains over there, and there are many crosses out in the mountains. It's a very Catholic country, and there are many crosses and images of Our Lady and different kinds of stuff in the mountains. So one of these excursions, they were walking, and Joaquin says that he saw way in the back a big cross, a white big cross planted there in the middle of the field. And Joaquin thought to himself, he knew St. John Paul II pretty well, and he thought, well, this is going to be a difficulty. Not because there's anything wrong with finding a cross, but because he knew what the Pope was going to do. And actually, Pope John Paul II saw the cross. And immediately he went toward it. And he embraced it. And Joaquin says that he spent a long time on the cross. He thought, okay, it's going to be 5-10 minutes. Well, 5-10 minutes went by. He was silent. He took a picture of it, which we got to see. It was amazing, beautiful picture. The Pope just embracing the cross, loving it, praying. 10 minutes went by, 15, 20, 25, and after around 35 minutes, the Pope finally let go. This anecdote, which seems like a very small thing, really moves me And it can move us today to pray about today's gospel. Jesus tells us, whoever wishes to come after me must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Whoever wishes to come after me, whoever wishes to be my disciple, must deny himself and pick up his cross, like really love the cross, like Jesus loved his cross. Jesus was not there like against his will carrying this big burden and suffering. And of course he suffered. He was a man. Of course he didn't like pain, but he embraced it. He loved it. He chose to carry the cross for us. And we can imagine that with all the suffering and all the pain, he really loved the cross and he embraced it with all his heart, full of love, knowing that it would bring so much good, so much grace, redemption. That is the way this saint, John Paul II, embraced the cross. Not only there, kind of like pretending for the cameras, there were no cameras there, besides Joaquin's, but there were no press. He embraced that cross because he loved it. And he showed that with his life. We see the life of a saint like John Paul II, and he really sacrificed himself for the church in Poland, for the church in the whole world when he was chosen as a pope, for the people around him, out of love of Jesus Christ. He denied himself. He took up his cross and followed Jesus. That is what we are being called to do by Jesus himself. And then Jesus in his gospel presents us with something that might seem like a contradiction. He says, whoever wishes to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake and that of the gospel will save it. If you wish to save your life, you need to lose it. What is that supposed to mean? There's another example that sometimes Jesus gave us. You have the example of a grain of wheat or a seed that is planted in the ground. And he says, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. The grain of wheat that is planted in the ground dies, rots in the ground. But it is precisely when it dies that it gives fruit. And a Christian that dies to himself, not physically death, sometimes, some Christians are called to death by martyrdom, but most of it's like through sacrifice, through prayer, through the simple fact of forgetting about herself, like a good mother. A good mother forgets about herself and she gives herself completely to her husband, to her children. A good husband forgets about himself and sacrifices his whole life for his wife, his children, and that family gives fruit. And that person that might seem from the outside that is wasting his life instead of like partying and worrying about himself, that person finds happiness. How many times have we experienced that? If we die to ourselves, if we pick up our cross and follow Jesus, then we find Christ and we find happiness with it. What profit is there for one to gain the whole world and forfeit his life? Jesus, we want to die to ourselves. We want to pick up our cross. We want to embrace it. Like St. John Paul II and so many saints embrace their crosses and follow you, knowing that following you will give us happiness, knowing that following you will give so much fruit for us and for all the world. I thank you, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations that you have communicated to me in this meditation. I ask your help to put them into effect. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.